This is The Bagel Report, a podcast exploring Jewish representation and identity in popular culture, with your hosts Esther Kostanowitz and Erin Ben Moshe, and now a production of J, the Jewish News of Northern California. Hey, Erin.
Hello.
Hello.
Good morning.
Just us here today. Very quiet, intimate dialogue.
You know, I don't mind it.
I feel like maybe we should put on our NPR voices and say welcome.
I don't think I'm capable of being as calm as NPR is in the morning. I think even when I wake up, I'm like a 7.
Right. And we were up early today to record this because of work schedules. So we may be sharper. I don't know. We'll have to see how it works out.
It's possible. But also, we've been busy bees this week. We've been seeing movies. You've been going to live Jewish events. I mean, we've been bagels on the town, really.
Certainly. I mean, if there were a Bagels on the Town movie, we would be in it.
So obviously, listeners,
I don't know what that means. Sorry.
I've been listening to Smart Lists a lot, and I love when they engage in the listeners. They're like, "Hey pals, hey listeners," before they talk to you. So I think that's funny. But hey listeners, you guys are hearing this now, but we're really talking about events that we went to end of last week. And one was pretty big in Los Angeles, and one was kind of big everywhere. But I want to talk to you, Esther, about the event that you went to on Thursday, which is the Anti-Semitism roast.
It was Wednesday. Yeah, it was Wednesday. I went to this Anti-Semitism roast, which as soon as I heard about, I'm like, I have to go to this, right? It was so weird. It came out of nowhere. I found out about maybe Sunday. And it was Wednesday, and there were still some tickets available, but they did manage to sell out the Saban Theater on Wilshire. And at some point, they said that there were 1,900 people there. So that's really a lot of people. It's no Taylor Swift numbers, but, for Jewish comedy, it's not bad.
That isn't bad at all. Okay, so paint me the picture.
Right.
Is it High Holidays vibe? Is it Laugh Factory vibe? What were you entering in?
It was weird vibe. I mean, it was neither of those vibes, if those are the only two options. But I think, it was kind of it felt like an Israel event, even though they didn't really talk about Israel. It was kind of if you were going to see the cast of Shtisel at a big venue, and everybody was really happy to be there.
Sure.
But, they weren't really talking much about Israel. It was really just about joy of being Jewish and seeing something that had Jewish representation in it. So, I looked into it, and I found one of the cheaper seats, and I just paid for myself to go. And it was a time. It really was. I didn't understand what an anti-Semitism roast was, because I had never heard of such a thing, of roasting a concept instead of a person. And just to review what a roast generally is, in case some of our listeners are not aware, is that it's an honorary event that's held in honor of one person who sits in a chair, and then that's verbally skewered by a bunch of fellow comedians who then say, after they've been finished, tearing this person a new one.
Eviscerated, yeah.
Really eviscerating, really mean stuff that if I heard even one of these, I would cry for a year in my room. So, but after getting skewered, the comedians say, "Well, but seriously, buddy, you're the best, and I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the best. Love you, love you, love you tons."
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's Susie in Maisel, right?
Yes, for those who are kind of hey, that kind of sounds like that thing we just talked about. Yeah, that's the most recent. Jeff Ross does a ton of them too. He did a Netflix special on roasts, historical roasts he did at one point.
Yeah, he roasted Anne Frank very, very memorably. So
we talked about that.
Yeah, we did.
So how does one roast anti-Semitism?
Right, a concept. It's I was this is very very amorphous. And I also wondered that, because the person in the chair generally has a chance to retort at the end of the roast. And so I was assuming and hoping that anti-Semitism would not be present and attending, and that no one would say, hey, anti-Semitism, don't know what I'd do without you, buddy, at the end. Although I would have to say, although it is a real question about how much of Jewish organizational life is fueled by anti-Semitism. So we can talk about that another time.
Yeah, I guess also like comedians, if they can't talk about anti-Semitism, they have to talk about something else.
Right. And I think there's a lot of comedians over the years who have definitely, dabbled in this territory. But because this was a mostly Jewish crowd, they really went hard on the Judaism stuff. Lots of making fun of ourselves and trying to skewer these stereotypes about like Jews running the media and stuff like that. So anyway, to get back to it, I want to paint the scene for you a little bit. So the Saban Theater's on Wilshire, just down the block from the Federation, if that's a landmark that means anything to anybody, probably only to people in Los Angeles. I arrived super early because they're like, get there at 6:30 so you can get through security and can be in your seats by 7:30. I get there at 6:30 because I'm a rules person, and that's what I did. And there were 5 people there, like waiting outside the theater. And I was like, are you guys waiting to get in to the theater? And then they said, yes, we are. And I was like, okay. So I joined the line in back of them. They start looking at me like I'm a weirdo. Okay, fine. And then I joked with one of them. I said, so since we got here early, that means we get the best seats, right? And the guy goes, oh no, you were supposed to reserve seats ahead of time. So
we are in a laughing mood already.
Off to a hilarious start, hoping this guy isn't one of the comics.
Yikes.
And then he looked at me and like I was a weirdo, just kind of standing. Why was I standing behind them? And he looked at me and goes, oh, we're not waiting to get in. We're waiting for someone. I'm like, okay, cool. See you later, weirdo. I went into the lobby. I went into the lobby. I went through security. It took 3 seconds. The lobby was open and people were milling about, but I didn't know anyone there.
Which is rare for you.
It really is. I was like, where was this advertised that I'm not seeing half of my shul here,
Okay, so wait, talk about that. So usually you go to Jewish events and you run into people that you knew in the nonprofit space or the ritual space or like pop culture space. So who do you think was there? Like, what kind of crowd was this? Was this really like, hey, a bunch of comedians and comedian friends who are also Jewish? Or like, are these people who are maybe mixed in Jewish life and want to explore Jewish in comedy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, my observations are mostly based on what I saw because I didn't really interact with anybody. I heard a lot of Hebrew and I was a little confounded by that because notoriously Israelis don't always get American comedy. So I think that I was very surprised to hear Hebrew almost dominantly in the lobby. I understood that the event was created by Donnie Zoldan, who I think is the owner of Stand Up New York, which is an Upper West Side comedy club. It used to be a couple of blocks from where I lived when I lived there. Donnie Zoldan is also producing the Chosen Comedy Festival, which was another event I was unaware of happening that was downtown that a lot of my friends did go to.
I think Elon Gold also hosted that one too, or
entirely
he was involved
possible.
In it.
It's like a law. You have to have Elon Gold emceeing these events because he did this one too. But he's also excellent, especially with this crowd. He knows the Jewish crowd. He knows the Orthodox crowd. He knows Persian. So he was able to really address all of those different aspects into the Jewish experience in Los Angeles. So,
okay.
So I think, I found out later that the team that was marketing the show relied on influencers and social media marketing to spread the word. So the crowd was a little younger, although there were older people there for sure. As I said, the team behind the show was really looking to influencers and social media marketing. And their goal, apparently, which I read in the J Post last night, was that they wanted to fill the audience with people who weren't necessarily Jewish, but who agreed that anti-Semitism was bad.
Okay.
And Zoldan, quoted in the J Post, said that he hoped the show would offer a younger, non-Jewish audience a different side, a different conversation about anti-Semitism, which I think is a very admirable goal. It's just a question of how many non-Jews really were there. And I think a bunch of the comics kind of asked people to identify themselves by putting up a hand if they weren't Jewish. And there were, I mean, it wasn't 5 people, but it wasn't 100 people. And so the question of like how they got there, I saw at least the people in front of me. One of the people raised her hand, and the boyfriend she was there with did not. So maybe that's somebody's Jewish, somebody's not. They go together and they go to this thing, and so it was an interesting crowd.
It's interesting that they wanted this to be kind of like a interfaith mixed, a multicultural space. A lot of the time it is geared toward the Jewish audience, and it's kind of just a way for Jews to kind of collectively make fun of themselves. But it's kind of nice that they were like, hey, we need, to me, it sounds like in order to fight anti-Semitism, everybody has to be laughing at it in order to reduce it.
Right.
And it can't just be Jewish people.
Yeah, I think it's important to have, Jewish allies there. And, that's a term we don't really use a lot when you're talking about, Jews and anti-Semitism. We don't really talk about Jews and allies the way the LGBTQ community does.
I'm glad that they were able to get at least maybe 50 people in the audience to raise their hand to say, I'm not Jewish, but I'm happy to be here.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really an important point. I think that having a mixed audience is a really great idea because we need partners in defending ourselves against anti-Semitism. It can't just be Jews complaining about Jews being treated badly. It has to, we have to have allies in the larger world. So, I loved that. And a bunch of the comedians made jokes about the fact that there were non-Jewish people there. And some of the comedy was like very Yiddish, very Jewish, very, talking about going to Israel, or like what that experience is like, or the fact that Judaism doesn't solicit membership, that we don't recruit. There was an extended bit on that, which I can talk about later. But I think that there, honestly, this was one of those things that the lineup was so ridiculously long. Yeah. And like, there were so many people on the sign that it was really like, how could you not sign up for this? So I'll tell you. Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit. Well, first of all, the roast part of this roast of anti-Semitism, it could have just been named like Comics Against Anti-Semitism, or Comedy Skewers Hate, or something like that. But the comics definitely did take on Hitler and Mel Gibson and Kanye, but also Trump and Biden, and for some reason, Anthony Fauci. And the two and a half of them, let's say, Trump was brought up because Trump, but also for his views on the Jewish community. And Elon Gold did a great impression of him talking about how nobody loves the Jews like I love the Jews, and nobody loves Israel. I'm the best for Israel, did the whole thing. But I think it was also interesting that there was making fun of Biden, there was some making fun of Anthony Fauci, because the crowd there, I do have a feeling, was very mixed in terms of right and left. Yeah. And there were some cheers when Elon Gold started talking about Trump, and some boos, and same with Biden. So I think, the Jewish community in LA, for the most part, is very liberal. But there is a pocket of, I think a rather deep pocket of religious Jews in LA who identify as Republican, whether or not that means they're pro-Trump, but they're certainly not for Biden. Anyway, so what they did take on and roast really was this concept of anti-Semitism and the tropes that are that engages in, especially the one about controlling the media. Almost every comic talked about this control the media stereotype. And, some of them said it was true. Some of them said it wasn't true. Like it was definitely one of the core things that people addressed.
I want you to just go speed around, name the people who are in the lineup, because it totally makes sense to me that that's where they're coming from. Because I think if a lot of people are coming to this audience via social media, and a lot of these people's platforms are in Hollywood and they rely on, interviews, or they rely on streaming services or, platforms in which to perform, I think it totally makes sense that they're trying to debunk this theory or prove this theory that Jews control the media. Because that's, I think, the world that they are in for the most part.
Yeah. And what was interesting about that, and, I'm not going to do like jokes from all of the people because not a stand-up comic. Fairly funny on a regular basis, but not really a stand-up comic.
I think so.
Yeah, thanks. You too, buddy. Couldn't do this without you. So yeah, I think, just going through it very quickly, Jeff Ross, who is the roast master generally. So it makes sense. You can't have a roast without Ross. I don't know if that's his slogan, but it should be. Alon Gold hosted it because, like we said, that is the law.
It's a prerequisite.
Yes. If you have a Jewy event in LA, you have to have either Alon Gold or Avi Lieberman hosting it. And he, like I said, he knows Jews, and he also is a terrific impressionist. Yamaneika Saunders, who is a writer for Inside Amy Schumer and a stand-up comic. She is not Jewish, but she did an extended riff about how Blacks and Jews are similar. I know you told me to go through it really quickly, so I'm going to just do that for the rest of them. Modi, who is on fire recently. He is awesome. He put his energy just skyrocketed when he was on stage. Okay, I'm getting back to the going through quickly. Rachel Bloom, Tehran, Eli Leonard or Ellie Leonard, and Howie Mandel. And there could have been more performers, quite honestly. I just don't remember. I was scribbling in a little notebook and it was dark. So you can imagine what that looks like. So I have some things written down. Yeah.
But it was cool because it's a list of women and men and writers and actors and comedians and Ashkenazi Jews, Mizrahi Jews,
non-Jews,
non-Jews, but those who still understand the Jewish experience. I love that. It feels well-rounded. It feels intentional. It feels like, hey, all of this visibility is important. And I love that because you don't always get that.
Yeah, I will say that the women's contributions were very minimal. One of the things, obviously, when I see Rachel Bloom on a lineup, I'm hoping for some really substantive Rachel Bloom. But she got out there and they said, she's going to sing a song. And I was like, okay, well, now I know she's doing Remember That We Suffered. And then that'll be it. She did. Yeah. So,
and that's all she did.
That's all she did. Yeah. And it was really, I think it was a waste of her talent. She definitely has been one of those people who has represented Judaism, secular Judaism, who has spoken out about anti-Semitism and, for love and for all of the good things in the world. And I really felt like that wasn't, I don't know if it wasn't respectful, or maybe she just didn't have time, or, she's been very active on the WGA strikers line. So
maybe that's all she wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and the question of how this event was impacted by the strike, the writer's strike, and the fact that people maybe didn't want to write new material because they're on strike. So
or maybe they had more time because all their projects were frozen. So they were able to round people up to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think certainly a lot of Alon Gold's routine is stuff that I've heard dozens of times before. And one of the things that, you heard from a couple of people is kind of I haven't seen this many Jews in one place since my bar mitzvah. That's not even a joke anymore. It's not even an open line. It's just really kind of just what is that? I hope that wasn't too loud on the mic, but anyway, I just feel like it was cheesy. So
what were the high moments?
And there was also Triumph the Insult Comic Dog.
Yes. Talk to me about that.
Okay, so triumph.
But is that a high moment for you or a low moment for you?
No, that was not a high moment for me.
All right, so let's do roses and thorns. We'll end with your roses. So start with your thorns.
Okay, the thorns, the low moments, I guess, that you talk about for the show. Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, which is apparently a generational thing because you didn't know what the heck I was talking about, is a puppet that is voiced by Robert Smigel, who has written with Conan for, decades. And basically Triumph generally goes out on the street and interviews people about something. One of the most famous bits that they did was back in was it 2001 or 2002 when Triumph went to the theater in New York where Star Wars Attack of the Clones was premiering and talked to the people who were outside waiting online for the movie. Because that's what we did back then. When you wanted to get in to be the first person to see it, you couldn't buy it 3 weeks ahead of time. You had to stand outside the theater. And some of those people had been there, you don't remember. But anyway.
I do remember. I was one of those people standing in line to get Harry Potter books before you could get them.
Fair.
I just did not remember Triumph the Insult Comic Dog. I didn't.
Right. So that's one of Triumph's most famous things is where he talks to all the nerds online outside the Ziegfeld Theater in New York. So yeah, it's from a long time ago, obviously. But he's continued to work with Conan over the years, being on the late night show and doing segments. And so he has a very strong fan base. And because Robert Smigel is Jewish and very involved in that whole universe of Jewish comedy, he often is called upon to do segments at these things. And he was supposed to be there in person, which I think would have been a different energy. But because Robert Smigel got called away to London, Triumph ended up taking to the streets of London and asking people about anti-Semitism and Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. And it was just I don't know. I don't know if the people he talked to were not interesting or odd, but it didn't land as a filmed segment. And it really brought the energy down, which is unfortunate. And there also Michael Rappaport was there. You know Michael Rappaport?
Yes. Okay. Familiar. Yeah.
Yes. How do you know Michael Rappaport?
I know him from a couple different shows, but I also just know him from being this very loud New York guy on the street.
Yeah.
And a lot of the last couple years has been him calling out anti-Semitism and bigotry on social media.
Yes, and I thought that was the most interesting part of what he presented. I mean, he was the one who said that I haven't seen this many Jews in one place since my bar mitzvah, and that didn't start things off great. But when he talked about social media and his activism and how things he said and put him in social media jail, where his account was frozen for a month because he said something against anti-Semitism or something like that. And so that was really interesting stuff. But the stand-up comedy wasn't really there for me. But you probably also know him from Friends, right?
I didn't actually know him from Friends. I know him from Atypical.
Oh.
That was the first thing where I was and it's one of those newer shows where I'm oh, that's you. I know him from social media, but then I was oh, you're that guy. But you're right. He isn't Friends.
Yeah. No, he's really known for being that acerbic, pissed off New Yorker. So
yeah, he's really good at it.
Yeah. So he did that really well. Okay. So, every time I'm telling you that's all the people who were there, I remember more people who were there because Montana Tucker was also on the sign. And do you know who Montana Tucker is?
Okay. I'm not looking at our notes, but that name sounds familiar. Is it a TikToker person? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Tell everybody who it is.
So Montana Tucker has become this anti-Semitism TikToker. And she has 14 million followers. And she has grandparents who were Holocaust survivors. And she talked about her grandmother being a survivor of the Auschwitz. And I was the Auschwitz? I'm
drop the.
Right. I feel Auschwitz is high enough.
We know what you're talking about.
We know which one you're talking about. Not.
We don't have to say and Auschwitz.
Right.
We know.
The Auschwitz, right. So I feel good that we're telling start telling Holocaust jokes on this pod.
It's not even the joke; it's more the semantics. Right, everybody calm down.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, there were some Holocaust jokes also, including the fact that I forget who it was who said it. I'm sure I wrote it down somewhere that you really shouldn't use the words roast and Jews in the same sentence. So,
yeah, I think that was during the Tester Roast deal of Anne Frank. I think I heard that one too. So
maybe Jeff Ross did it again. Like, he did some of the stuff that he's done before again. And then he had a whole song about the contributions that Jews have made to life and to humanity. But there was also like a phrase in there about like, if Jesus comes back, we'll kill him again. And then everybody was like, huh. Like the energy just kind of went, like what?
We're like, okay, so that one didn't land.
Yeah.
Still don't like being held responsible for that one.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, Jeff Ross always does something that leaves you with even if most of it is like hilarious.
It's true. Okay, wait, but I want you to share a rose, and then I want you to go into a new segment, which is, if Esther was consulted, what would she change?
Right. Great question. So I think the highlights were really Modi, who, if you haven't seen, you should check him out. We'll find some clips and put them in the show notes. But his energy was through the roof. He enters high energy and stays at that level the entire time he was on stage. There was, how comics sometimes be like, and they just like, they amplify, they ascend in pitch, but he was like very consistent. And if anything, he started like very high and then went higher.
Amazing.
He has a bit about how he loves the royals and how fascinating they are because they're definitely like the opposite of Jews. And so it was a really good bit. He really laid into the royals for like schlepping Queen Elizabeth all around during to every town, for her funeral procession. And that was really funny. Again, like Esther's not going to do the bits. Esther's going to tell you about the bits. And then he also urged everyone to be proud of being Jewish and to, quote, bring Mashiach energy. And so like, that kind of framework really hit in the crowd. Everybody was like, woo! So that was really good. Like I said, there were a bunch of people who talked about Kanye and that, he was an anti-Semite who was basically taken down by the Jews. So, for instance, Yamaneika Saunders, her set was great. And she addressed this Jews controlling the media thing by saying, Jews don't control anything except Kanye's bank account. And so I thought that was a funny line. Everybody loved that line. When I first heard it, I thought it was about the fact that when Jews spoke up against Kanye, like his money was basically canceled. But it's just entirely possible that his accountant is also Jewish. Right. Mm-hmm. So she was really funny. Tehran, have you ever heard Tehran's stuff?
I don't think so.
So Tehran, first of all, his name literally is Tehran. He's half Iranian and half Black. And he did a whole bit about how his parents thought it would be a good idea to name him Tehran. So his maternal grandmother is Mizrahi Jew from Egypt. On the other side, he's got Muslim. So I think he was the one who made the joke about Jews and roasting. But he talked a lot about being Black. He talked more about being Black than being Jewish, quite honestly. But he's also very high energy. I think he was better the last time I saw him, where he was emceeing like a whole night of comedy. And he was very good at that. So maybe they just didn't give him enough time. Eli Leonard, I don't even know how you say his name, but he's kind of like a cross between young Larry David and Kyle, that guy Kyle from Saturday Night Live, who does all the bits, like kind of a Jufro situation. He was in one of the Curb episodes with the city council election. But the funniest parts of his act was really working the silence. Like you can tell that he's funny, but it was very like low energy and it wasn't dead air. It was strategic silence. But sometimes, especially when you're dealing with a performance that's so high energy and so hyping people up, this was a kind of a bottom out of the energy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And Howie Mandel's obviously been doing this a very long time. I haven't seen him do stand-up in a while. You know, he's been busy hosting shows, et cetera. He also like took on this woman in the front row who apparently fell asleep during the show. And, you know, that's not great to be in the front row and falling asleep during the show. I don't even know how you do that, quite honestly. Maybe she fell asleep during Ellie Leonard's bit because it was a lot of silence. But he was, I mean, Howie Mandel is an expert. He's been doing this for like a million years. So he was very, very funny. And really, on the whole, everybody was super funny. Alon Gold definitely anchored the whole evening, and he was terrific. I think this was his joke. I don't know. Sometimes I mix up the ones that were his jokes and the ones that were Modi's jokes, because they're both like kind of from this very intensely Jewish perspective with some background in the Orthodox world. So I think it was Alon Gold, but forgive me if it was Modi, but it was definitely one of them, who said that instead of turning prospective converts away 3 times, like we're supposed to, like the rabbis do, you know, it's like, no, you don't want to join us. No. Is that the process for conversion should be that you should have somebody fly from New York City to Israel with 5 conditions met. It's on El Al. It's an afternoon flight. It's the middle seat, no sleeping pill, and economy. And if they want to join Judaism after that, let them. So, so I thought that was a very funny moment. Yeah, I think if Esther was involved and had consulted, okay, I love this question, both because I probably would have, you know, earned some money from it, which is always better than spending money in my mind.
Okay, I just want to so you already said like Rachel Bloom, you wanted her, you wanted more of her. You weren't really thrilled about like Montana Tucker being there.
Oh,
it
yeah.
felt kind of more influencer-y than like comedy.
Yeah.
So out of those things, like what else would you have changed?
Right. So Noah Tishby was also sitting in the front row, and she's been like an emissary for pro-Israel and anti-Semitism. And Alon Gold, I think, invited her just to say something. And she got up and she said, "Oh, I didn't plan anything. Okay, so here I am." And she said something, and it was not funny because, you know, she's not a comic. And it was just kind of pointless, kind of preaching to the choir about Israel. And it was just, I was like, why are we spending time on this? And I think that, you know, I would have added more community partners, you know, and had representation from them, because as far as I know, it was only the Federation who co-sponsored this, because Noah Farkas got up to, you know, give a little spiel about Federation. Okay. It was thankfully very short, and, you know, I mean, look, it's hard to be a person with a sense of humor on stage with a bunch of comedians because they're professionals. So like, so that's number one, is I would have added more community partners. Secondly, there weren't enough women involved. That was just, I mean, Rachel Bloom was on stage for like 3 seconds, as I said. Montana Tucker, I mean, whatever. She's not a comic, even though I think she was on the lineup on the poster, because she's a draw for some people. She's not for me, but I think, you know, there were a lot of Jewish women comics who would have been great on stage. You know, I mean, without even thinking about it, I kind of rattled off a bunch of people, like Sarah Silverman, obviously. But if, you know, you can't get her, or even if you can get her, get Alex Borstein, Jessica Kirson, Judy Gold, Vanessa Bayer, Julie Klausner, Michelle Collins, Rita Rudner, Andrea Savage, Rachel Dratch, Hannah Einbinder, Amy Schumer, Jessie Klein, Eliza Schlesinger, and any number of others. Like,
so it's not like we can't find anyone. It's like, no, they're there. Like either they just weren't available or you didn't ask.
Right.
Or they didn't want to.
Right. Or they didn't want. I mean, that's also like I said, the question of how much the writer's strike impacted this, how much people's touring schedules impacted this. I don't know those variables. Maybe they asked all women and they had to make do with the men, but that's not going to be the narrative that is in the takeaway from this show.
So you had a good time?
Yes, a good time was had by mostly all. And yeah, it was really fun to be there. It was a really fun night out. Erin, you had some fun night out recently too.
I did. I went to go see Elementals. It's the new Pixar movie. I love Pixar. It's a staple. Little bit of a generational shift here, but like, I feel like I grew up in the time where every year Pixar was just creating some of the best movies I've ever seen, best animated movies I had ever seen. Like, one after the other, like, and then all of a sudden, as an adult, it just felt like a lot of the movies hadn't been as up to par. So when I saw Elementals, I was very excited about it. So I wanted to go see it, and it's out now. Everyone can go check it out in theaters, because they don't all go to theaters anymore. Sometimes they go to Disney Plus. And as I was watching Elementals, a film that is not explicitly Jewish, I thought to myself, it sure is. It sure feels like a Jewish story.
Yeah, and occupational hazard of being on the Bagel Report is that
yes,
it's a side effect.
So the movie follows Ember and Wade in a city where fire, water, land, and air live together. So it plays on the Pixar theme of what if blank had feelings. In this movie, it's what if the elements, the physical elements of nature had feelings.
Right.
And so
and I just want to ask you, so Ember is from the fire family, and Wade, because you wade in water. That's okay.
Yeah. And so they live separately but together, right? So it's kind of like a New York or like a metropolis or whatever they call it. And so they've got different boroughs. They've got different territories. They all share a metro, which is funny because sometimes Ember is like dangerous, right? She's fire. So sometimes she'll burn a hedge by accident, or she'll like sizzle out if she's in water. So like there are hazards, everywhere. But something that struck out to me is this movie is very stereotypically like, it's a boy meets girl. They're from different worlds. Can it ever work out? Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story. We've seen it all before. What's interesting to me is Jewish people who see this movie, I think, are going to find it Jewish. And the question is, which family do they think is Jewish? Because you have two very distinct families. One is Ember's family. She represents this immigrant, first-generation immigrant coming to America for a better life. And they have a daughter, and their daughter is going to, be really proud of where she came from. She's not going to try and fit into this world where fire may not accept her. Like all those things, the good, the bad, the stereotype that come with an immigrant narrative, right? But Wade is water. He still has hazards in this city, but the city
He flows.
It works for him.
He flows with it. Right.
Seriously. So he also comes from a family that's more established. They live in like this high-rise water apartment in the middle of the city. His family is more open-minded. They're artsy. They've had success. You can tell that like they've had success. And so like they've been established here for a while. And so the things that they're talking about are kind of out of this world for Ember, who just doesn't feel like her dreams are possible because she has to provide for her family. Both of these stories are really like honorable and real. And it's crazy to me because kids are not going to get this. This is definitely like a Pixar movie for teens and adults, which is also something they've never done before, really, since Turning Red. But like, I just see two different Jewish stories here, right? Like the Jews coming to America, or the first generation, second generation Jewish families, and then the Jewish families that have been here for a while. And they have sort of like a privilege, right? They're not thinking about the clothes they carried on their back. They're thinking about, okay, the more luxury elements of life. And I feel like I know both of these families. I've lived with both of these families. I've grown up with both of these families. I've seen them in my communities. And there are times where even personally, I felt like I'm more Ember's family. Oh no, now I feel more of Wade's family. And I'm so interested by this, Esther, and I don't want to spoil a lot of the plots because I want people to see this.
Yeah, I want to see it.
It's like, sometimes it does. It feels like it's a little on the nose because like Wade's family meets Ember's and they're like, oh my God, you're like a beautiful artist. Like you should go explore that. Like I can help you. We know people that if you ever wanted to help explore this artistic side of you, you can. And she's like, how can you say that? Like I have to support my family. I have to take on this family business. It's literally named for me. Like that's my destiny. And she's like, you'll never understand that. Right. Like, it's like, there's all these like tropes a little, but I think it's very cool for a Jewish community to see multiple identities at once without actually ever naming it.
Right. I love the creativity that goes into that, trying to figure out like fire. What is fire's characteristics, right? It's burning. It's very hot. It's very like reactive. What is water's essential characters? Flow. It's flow, you know? So it sounds like there was a lot of creativity and imagination that went into this. And I really do always appreciate that about Pixar. You know, I remember a time before Pixar and they really did revolutionize the animation industry. So it's, I still remember that first lamp. Do you know the lamp I'm talking about? The Pixar lamp?
Of course. The lamp and the ball. Yeah.
Right. So when we saw that lamp for the first time, we're like, what the magic is this? It's like, it looks real. Oh my God. And, you know, obviously it stayed part of their logo for so long because it's, you know, it's so elemental to what they do.
And here's the thing, is this movie, like my friends and I, we talk about what's top tier Disney Pixar. And we're like, okay, for us, top tier would be WALL-E, would be Up, would be Toy Story, would be Finding Nemo, would be like these movies that are absolute successes, absolute hits. You watch them every year because they're staples. Is Elementals going to be top tier Pixar? I don't think so. It might be at the same level as Luca, as
what about
Like
Encanto?
a dinosaur. Encanto is not Pixar.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, it's good. I think to me, what's important about it is that they successfully achieved the immigrant story in a way that you don't actually know which immigrant story this is, because I feel like it's resonant for anyone. Anyone will identify. Anyone who knows this immigrant story will see themselves in it in some way. And I think it's great because the challenge is not like hate, right? No one's like trying to destroy, you know, the town. No one's trying to, there's no like quote unquote anti-Semitism or racism in the community. It's just like there are these unspoken barriers because they haven't figured out how to coexist safely. Mm-hmm. So it's like, which is kind of refreshing because obviously that could easily have been a thing. The challenge is more of like, how do we accept ourselves? How do we accept each other?
Right.
How do we like grow and also be more than one thing to our family and our friends? And that's kind of nice.
There's no like big looming threat that all of the elements have to work together in order to overcome.
At one point, you think that's what it's going to be, but really it ends up just being something for Wade and Ember to figure out for themselves.
Right.
So it's very small that way. Kind of like Zootopia, but I think I liked Zootopia better. But I am really interested. So Jewish community listeners, if you're listening to this, go see it and let me know which one you see. Because I saw it with a couple of my Jewish friends and we all kind of felt different. We all saw each other in different families. And I think that's so interesting. And I think that's important for the Jewish community to see. Like, oh, we're not just one story anymore. We're multiple different types of story. And I think that's kind of cool.
That's cool. When you first started talking about this, like I definitely thought about that old rabbinic argument against intermarriage, you know, when they say like a bird may love a fish, but where will they build their home? So it's like, you know, a fire may love a water, but how do they get along? How does that happen? Mm-hmm.
And they kind of answer that. They do show you like, you know, fire doesn't just get put out by water and fire doesn't hurt water. So like it's an interesting situation. With the resolution. And I think the most touching part, at least for me, is the end. Because it really is, at its core, it's a story about a family, but it's also a father-daughter relationship. And I'm a sucker for a good dad and daughter hug at the end of a movie. So, I enjoyed it. So go see it and let us know what you think on social media or by emailing us. Or leaving a message in the comments. But while we're talking about father-daughter relationships, this past Sunday was Father's Day and we have dads. So we thought we'd end our episode with like a really quick speed round of our dads. We wanted to give a shout out to Al and Joel, who sound like a sitcom put together or like a cartoon on Saturday mornings.
Right. Al and Joel's Excellent Adventures in Daddom.
I'd watch that.
Yeah.
I would watch that.
I think you've been watching half of it the whole time, and I've been watching half of it the whole time, and just we never got a chance to watch it together.
When this writer's strike ends, man, we should put something together. Okay, so let's not, before we tell people who our dads really are, tell us who your dad would be if he was played by a celebrity.
Oh, gosh. It's so hard because, you know, you talk about things like sense of humor and then there's like physicality and all of that. But I think that I would probably say Robert Redford. Like, I think, yeah, because my dad, he, you know, his hair's not so red now, but once upon a time it was. And so, you know, I think that when I was growing up, that was kind of what I looked at him as kind of like a Robert Redford type. But he's very funny. So like, you know, I was looking at Robert Redford most recently in, was it Avengers? No, it's Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Mm-hmm. So like, that's when I was like, yeah, I think that there's kind of like a similarity there. Anyway, I'm not saying necessarily that my dad founded Sundance or anything like that, but I just think like in the movie of us, you know, that's probably who we'd bring in.
I love that. You're very generous. I'm a little more literal for mine. While I think my dad would have loved to have been played by like, nope, I can't think of any other person to play my father except for Jason Alexander. And this is my yearly reminder that my father is Jason Alexander, but not actually. They just have like this uncanny resemblance, just like with their charisma and the physicality of them. Like, people have stopped us growing up saying, hey, are you that guy? And my dad goes, no. And like once someone was very adamant about it. And my dad was very worried that this person was going to think Jason Alexander was a jerk. So he like scribbled something down to make it look like it was an autograph, because he was like, one day, like he's going to like really meet Jason Alexander and he's going to go, you're such a jerk. But yeah, I really like, if listeners, anyone, if you're out there, Jason Alexander, if you're listening, hi, I would love to meet you because it's enough already. We just have to get this happening.
Yes.
It's too much already.
Jason Alexander, come meet your fake daughter.
Like my favorite horrible joke. It's so crazy that, so my Zadie passed away a couple years ago and it was very hard for our family and he was kind of suffering for a long time. So, you know, for a while. So it was okay. But we were leaving this, like the rehab center. Like it was after like a bad day. He was not doing well. And my brother, my dad and I were walking out. We're kind of disheartened. And, you know, we're realizing that like, you know, he's not doing well. And someone comes up to my dad and goes, I'm really sorry to bother you, but are you Jason? And my dad goes, yeah, I am, but I'm with my family right now. Can you? And he goes, oh, sure. I totally understand. And he drives away. And my brother and I stop and we're like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Like, of this moment, this is what's whatever. It was crazy. It was like,
it also came along at just the right time to bring a little lift. So that's
it was a good lift, but it was also like, you could have just said no. You could have said no, but he's so used to like saying yes that he just couldn't help himself. So it has to happen. It just one day we have to get it to happen. But Esther, I feel like you're also a daddy's girl. So tell me the ways in which, like, if we had our dads both on this Zoom, like, what are things we, like, listeners would immediately go, oh, they are the same.
Right. So I think my dad and I famously actually share a love of rhyme and wordplay, whether that means, you know, puns or, you know, every time I merge two words to form a third word that sounds kind of like it, but it tells you what those two things are together. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's really my genetic destiny, stepping in to say hi. Also, you know, he used to, like, all the time when we were growing up, like, just kind of include musical lyrics in conversation. So like, there were just certain like buttons that whenever we talked about a certain thing, he would say something that was a line from a musical or a line from a song that was popular for him, but we had no idea what he's talking about. So that happened a lot. He and I are both very good at song parodies also. That's amazing. His name is Al. So occasionally we would call him Weird Al, because he did song parodies and his name was Al. So, Yankovic Kostanowitz is like kind of, similar.
Esther.
What?
I feel like this is really important for us to have like a live reaction right now on the Bagel Report.
What?
I don't know. I'm like weirdly emotional. The Pittsburgh shooter, he was just found guilty of all 63 charges.
Wow. Well, sometimes the American justice system works. A lot of times it doesn't, but sometimes it does. Well, I don't even know what to say in reaction to that. I think that, nothing, justice doesn't bring back the people, doesn't erase the trauma of that day. And it's still such a pivotal event in the history of American anti-Semitism and anti-Jewish actions. So, I think it's, if anything, it kind of takes us back to the beginning of this show and what we're talking about when we're talking about the roast of anti-Semitism, that, even though we can laugh about it, there's still like a lot of people who hold anti-Semitism very seriously. And there's still also people who are committed to perpetrating anti-Semitism. So I hope that, we say Baruch Dayan Emet when somebody dies, but, blessing a truthful judge is also like, it seems kind of appropriate here. You can say Baruch Dayan Emet, blessed is the true judge, or the judge of truth, however you want to, translate it. And you can say that the truth won out here, that justice won out here. But like I said, there's still so much pain, and that's always going to be the case. Wow.
Also, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I just saw it blop up. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And I was like, oh my gosh.
It's all right. I think our dads are also anti-Semitism, as are we. Yeah. So we really have that in common.
Figure out a better word, anti-Semitism. Like, oh my God. Because I'm like, now are we for? Does the double antis cut it out? So now we just have Semitism? Like, what is that?
Well, I think that, there have been conversations over the years that anti-Semite is not an accurate description because Semitic people include people of Arabic origin. But, we can argue about that some other time. Mm-hmm. Semantics. Sorry. I call that some antics with semantics in Semitic, anti-Semitic semantics. Yeah. And actually, that's just a great example of when my dad comes through. Like that's definitely one of the things that we do a lot of.
I love that.
My dad has been doing all of these comedy shows about Jewish comics and comedians, and he does them on the East Coast, but he also does a bunch of them in Florida every winter.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great, and he talks about Mel Brooks and Sid Caesar and all of the the Jewish comics of yore. And has been running this blog, Jewish Humor Central, for the last couple of years. And by couple of years, I mean probably close to 12 or 13 years, 13, wow. 14, 15, something like that. Thousands of posts. So yeah, he's very prolific and really appreciates humor and Jewish humor. And I think that's definitely something that he and I have in common. I know that's something that you and your dad have in common as well.
Yeah, I think I get my funny, silly, weird, really random, oh, that just made me think of this. I think I get that from him. We both love cooking, and we both have cooking playlists, or if I ever came over to his house and I heard a certain playlist, I'm like, oh, he's in the kitchen and he's cooking something, and lo and behold, there he will be. So we both do that. He's just the life of the party. People used to call him, and sure, people still call him, Fun Bobby. And so
Even though his name's not Bobby, because it was from a Friends reference about
Yeah. I think Fun Jolie, I guess, would be more accurate. But yes, he's always just been very fun, very outgoing. He's a righteous dude. So
that's from Ferris Bueller.
Yes. So, and like, I think that's what it is. We both like absorb quotes all the time. So we reference each other. Like a lot of our dialogue is quotes, so much so that like if I say something originally funny, he goes, "What's that from?" I'm like, "No, nothing. Can't I just be funny?"
It's from me because I'm funny.
He makes everybody laugh. So like when you can make him belly laugh, it's like truly one of the most amazing feelings. You're like, "Yes, I did it."
Yeah.
But also side note, my father-in-law, Mike, he looks like Leonard Nimoy. Everybody has said he looks like Spock. So when the two of them are together, it's like TV gold. It's like, oh my God, can you believe we have all this talent in one family? Unbelievable. So I want to give a shout out to him because I hit the father-in-law jackpot. He's truly wonderful.
Right. And on my phone, the Pittsburgh news just came in. But yeah.
So with that.
I also just want to say also that, I had a chance to meet your dad at your wedding last year. And that was really fun too. I know that he is also in a choir, right?
Yeah, he sings. So I get the singing from him too.
Right.
But I also get the singing from my mom. We're a family of singers. So it's nice when we all have a singing part that we can follow.
Yeah, my dad too. He was in a choir when he was in school, and I remember my mother used to say that she was very fearful that when she met somebody that she loved, that he wasn't going to be able to carry a tune, but he was able to carry a tune, which is great. And then the two of them went on to write parody musicals together. They did one for Purim and one for Hanukkah. And it's been, the creativity in my family is something that I prize, that I have benefited from, that I have internalized, all that good stuff. So thanks, Dad.
I love that. So, okay, listeners, one more thing. I know you have a lot of homework this week. Okay, so to recap, go see Elementals and tell us what you think. And also tell us about your dads. Tell us, we know Father's Day happened, but it's still in your brain. Tell us what you think, who you think your celebrity dad is, or who would play your dad in a movie or TV show of your life, and
why.
Let us know. Right. Yeah.
And let us know. You can always contact us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. And don't forget to give us 5 stars. Like, I know that's like chutzpah for us to ask, but, and I'm not even sure 5 stars matters. Just, but if you happen to be one of those people who likes to click on things you like and give it 5 stars, who are we to say no?
Yeah, we'll take it.
It's a little awkward to ask for it, but we look forward to your feedback because we know what makes us laugh and what we find interesting. And we really want to open it up and find out what you find interesting. So leave us comments, questions, suggestions on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Anywhere you want to, except on TikTok. We're not there yet. But I know I'm too old to start a TikTok. So if we do, it'll have to be on Erin. And I don't think she has the time.
Woo! Challenge accepted.
Okay, there you go. All right. See you all next time.
Bye. This has been The Bagel Report, a production of Jay, the Jewish News of Northern California, and a part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network. Thank you to Lev Gringaz, our producer from Jew Folk Inc., David A.M. Walensky and Andrew Essenston, and Danny Lipsky for creating our logo. You can find us wherever podcasts are listened to. Connect with us on social, on Twitter, at Esther K, at Eben Moshe, and at The Bagel Report, on Instagram at Esther Kostanowitz, at Eben Moshe, and TBR the Pod, and by emailing us at thebagelreport@gmail.com. Now go and watch something interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it next time on The Bagel Report.